Hey there guys, welcome back to ARTFX Studios and you're watching Tutorial Tuesday, Season 2 about Glitchhop. I've created the track is done, and the only thing left I need to do is the mixdown and the mastering. So, I have my track now, and the track itself peaks at about, let's see, right now it says -0 or -1.15 decibels. Now that's way too high. I want to get that down to about -6 so we have enough headroom for the mastering stage. And to do that, I basically need to mix this. I need to redo the mixdown. Now I've already mixed this quite a lot during the production phase. I like to do the mixing while I'm producing, you know, just to make everything sound cohesive and make everything sound like it's one track instead of multiple layers. And that's done pretty well. I mean, it sounds pretty good, but there are still some things left that I can do to make this even better. So I find that a lot of times when I create a track and I'm done with the track, I try to put as much into there as possible. And by doing that, I a lot of times get mixdowns that have a lot of high frequencies and a little bit too less low frequencies. So the sub is not as prominent as I want it to be. So today I'm gonna do the mixdown, and I'm gonna try to make to remix this and try to sort of like create the mixdown around the drums and the bass. The drums and the bass are the most important part of this track, and therefore I want those elements to really stand out, really be the most prominent in the mix. And then I'm gonna mix everything around those. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take a look at my drums group, which is this one. Looks okay. Instruments group. Okay, I'm gonna take my instruments group all the way down, so I don't have any volume coming out of that. I'm gonna do the same for the funk chops. The filter drop can stay the same. I don't need to change that. I'm also gonna take the volume of all 3 FX tracks down. Like that. So if I now play this, you're only gonna hear the drums and the bass. So let me put the bass and the drums right underneath each other so it's easier to see. And when I now play the bass on its own, let's listen. Okay, there's quite some sub in here. I actually changed some stuff. In the frequency splitter on the bass group itself, I took down the mid and the high frequencies. Why did I do that? If I set these both to 0, or let me just turn off the frequency splitter. When I turn off the frequency splitter, the bass track sounds like this. Now it's pretty big, it sounds pretty good, but the mid and high frequencies sort of like push away the sub a little bit. So I added that frequency splitter, and I kept the sub at 0 dB and took the other two down. And it really brings out that sub, and that's really cool. Now, I can, however, maybe introduce a little bit more mids. That's too much. Bring it down a little. Yeah, that sounds good. On the high band, I've also added a little bit of compression, and then I brought the output up. And what's that gonna do is it's basically just gonna even out the high frequencies, because the high frequencies often have a lot of volume changes. And if I turn on the multiband dynamics, you can hear how the high frequencies sound without the compression. Sound like that. No. Like that. That's how the high frequencies sound without the compression. And this width. So you can hear that it became a little bit louder. they are a little bit more evened out. And when we layer that with the other two, we get much more a much more stable high end, a much more high end that sort of like keeps its volume sort of like at the same level instead of going all over the place. And that's quite a useful trick. Now, the frequency splitter I'm using also has a utility that's making all the sub mono. Now that's really important. You don't want to have your sub bass going all around the place in the stereo spectrum, because that will not really relate that well to stereo speakers, for instance. If you, for instance, have a big sound system in a club, most of those sound systems are not stereo anyway. Most of those sound systems in a big club are mono, and that's because of the placement of the speaker, and everybody needs to hear the same thing in that same room, regardless of where in the room they are. If we would use stereo systems in a club, for instance, then the people standing at the left side and the people standing on the right side will hear different things. And you don't want to have that. So to do that, to sort of like get rid of that, you use a mono sound system. And by doing that, everybody is going to hear the same music regardless of where in the room they are. So, that being said, I think the bass sounds pretty good now. I'm gonna put on some effects, see how it looks. I have one here. It's called Flux Stereo Tool. And let's put it behind the compressor. Now, Flux Stereo Tool is really useful to sort of like look and see how your bass is gonna look. Okay, so I can see that a lot of my bass is in mono. And I'm getting some of the bass verb as well, which is being sent to the master track. So I'm gonna put this on my master and see what's happening. Okay, we are getting quite some stereo stuff, but that's mostly coming from the reverb, and the bass sound itself is pretty mono, to be quite honest. I wasn't really expecting it to be that mono, but it's pretty mono. Let's see what we can do. I can make it a little bit wider if I want. I'm gonna place this, however, on the high band, because I only want the high band to be wider. And I'm also gonna bring up that volume a little bit more now. So it made the high frequencies a little bit wider, and that helps to sort of like punch through the mix. So the bass is sounding pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way the bass sounds. It has a nice amount of sub, and that's definitely good. The next thing I would like to introduce is the funky chops. And why am I gonna work with the funky chops now? Is because the bass and the funky chops together create that filter drop. I have brought the volume of the funk chops down, and when I solo the filter drop track, I will hear both the bass and the funk chops as soon as I bring that volume up. So let's play that and try to mix in the funk chops to get the right amount of volume in terms of the bass and the chops together. Let's see how we can mix this. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's take a look at those funk chops on itself. Let's see what we can do to this. They sound pretty good. I'm gonna throw on the Flux Stereo tool to see how this looks. Okay, we're getting a lot of stereo widening from this one, so it's probably wise to go back to the bass and take off the Flux Stereo tool and just let that bass be quite mono, because the bass and the funk chops together create a really wide sort of like feeling. That being said, let's see what that Vogue is doing. I'm using the preamp, doing much. I'm adding quite some overdrive. Let's bring the overdrive down a little bit. Makes it sound a little bit less harsh. And let's see how that sounds together with the filter drop. That sounds pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty okay. I'm using this to sort of like blend the bass and the funk chops together. So this Vogue is controlling, it's basically processing both the bass and the funk chops together. Let's see if we add a little bit of compression. So let's see how much of a difference that makes. If I go to here, go to my filter drop track, I'm gonna reset that meter. Okay, so we're at minus 9.5 dB. And when I enable the compression, we're about 0.2 dB lower. Okay, so I can bring the volume of the filter drop track up a little bit. Let's just bring it up to minus 2.5. It looks to be about right. Minus 2.8 might be a little bit better. I want to have that bass and the funk chops to be about roughly minus 10 dB. I'm going to bring them down a little bit further. Let's just put them at minus 3 dB. Okay, minus 3.5 dB. Putting it at minus 3.5 dB now makes the filter drop track, so that's the bass and the funk chops together, peak at minus 10.4 dB. That's about right for me. I'm now gonna blend in the drums, because I think the drums are the most important element of the entire track. And the drums need to work together with the bass and the funk chops. So let's see how high our drums are peaking. My drums are peaking at minus 4.78 dB. That's way too high. Seriously, that's way too high. Let's bring this volume down. I'm gonna bring this down to -6. Let's see. There we have it, -6. And we're now peaking at about -10 dB. Let's drop this to -6.8, something like that. Yeah, that's about right. Let's see how this sounds together with the funk chops. It sounds pretty good. However, there's one problem though. I think the bass is overpowering the drums a little bit, and we are gonna counterattack that by using a little bit of sidechain compression. So I'm gonna take the glue compressor. I'm going to put it after my frequency splitter. Let's see, about here, after the other compressor as well. And I'm gonna go to the sidechain mode. And right here, I'm going to look at my main drums, which are this one. Which is that one. And I'm going to go to the bass group. And in this one, I'm going to enable sidechain. I'm going to go to the drums, main drums. And in the main drums, I want to look around and find the kick number 5. Let's take the kick post mixer. I can EQ this if I want, and that's pretty cool. Okay, so now I'm sort of like gonna try and find. I'm gonna use the pre-FX. I think that sounds good enough. Let's unsolo that. And let's add in a little bit of the threshold. I'm gonna bring the attack all the way down and bring the release, well, let's just keep it at about the middle position. If I bring that threshold down all the way, it becomes really obvious how the sidechain itself is gonna sound. And you can really use that to tweak the release times. We don't need that long of a release anyway. It sounds good. Bring that threshold back up again. Even further. And let's see how that kick and bass sound together right now. It definitely brought out the main kick, and that's really cool. Now, I can try how it sounds when I do this. Let's see how that sounds. And let's... Let's try and do that one. Now that glue compressor is both affecting the bass when the kick is playing, but also when the snare is playing, instead of using just the kick drum, because I want to give the snare a little bit more room as well. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't, I need to do 2 independent glue compressors, one for the kick and one for the snare. So let's see how this sounds. and with the drums. It's becoming better. I feel now that I can bring the filter drop track up a little bit. And I think I'm gonna put that glue compressor not on the bass track, but on the filter drop track. And I'm gonna throw it in front of all the processing. So what's gonna happen is it's going to add the sidechaining, which is gonna duck down that filter drop track, so that's the bass and the funk chops. It's gonna duck that down a little bit every time a kick and a snare is playing. And that way we create a little bit more room around those kick and snares. But then afterwards it's being processed again, it's being compressed, and that will sort of like make the sidechaining a little bit less obvious, but it still gives the drums a little bit more room to sort of like sound more punchy. Okay, that sounds pretty good. It's time to blend in the other stuff. I've got my instruments, which I've also have in the drop section. Let's listen to those instruments on its own. And let's see, let's bring up the volume. Okay, this one also runs through the filter drop, so that's pretty interesting. I can play this. Okay, that sounds pretty okay. I'm going to, let's see, add a little bit more reverb to that, which also gonna make it a little bit louder, but I don't really mind. I can now bring the volume of this one down a little bit. Sounds good. Okay, that sounds great. The next part, let's see. I'm gonna bring up this effects track. I think that sounds about right. Then the next one is also the one which contains the weird sample right at the start of the drop. Let's see. This one can be a little bit lower. And then we have the third effects track, which is the one which contains most of the effects for the drop section itself. And this effects track really gives the drop a little bit more impact. I mean, without, it sounds not as heavy as I want it to sound. When I add in that crash right at the start, it sounds a lot more in your face, a lot more heavy. I, however, want to blend this in really nicely. I am gonna bring this up to minus 10 dB, which is gonna make the crash a little bit too loud, I think. I'm gonna make that crash a little bit softer. And I think that sounds pretty okay. What I now want to do is look at my master, and let's go to the other view. And I want to take a look at my master and see where I'm peaking right now. So right now I'm peaking at minus 7 dB, which is a lot better than what we started with. And we now actually have some room for our mastering. What I want to do, however, is I want to take a look at this mixdown right now and see if I'm really happy with it. Let's take the crash, and I'm gonna pen this a lot to the left. So we're gonna get that. And I'm gonna do the same for the right, which is gonna be panned a lot to the right. Which gives the whole, yeah, how do you need to say it? It gives the whole effects track a little bit more stereo room, and it makes sure that that crash is not exactly in the center, and therefore it does not collide as much with the drums as it was doing without that panning. And it really gives the start of the drop a little bit more room to breathe, which is definitely good. And it most likely also makes for a little bit less higher peak value on the master. Okay, we're now actually peaking exactly at -7 dB. That's pretty good. I want to take a look at this. Okay. Let's take a look at that one. Let's see how wide this is. Okay, this is like a super wide sound. What I like to do to give this sound a little bit more of its own space is add an audio effect rack. And I'm gonna create 2 chains. One is gonna be panned hard to the right and the other one hard left. Which is gonna give that uplifter a little bit more room. Now, one thing I would like to do, and I'm gonna add a little bit of a volume automation to my master track. So I'm gonna add a utility, open up that master, and make it quite large. What I wanna do is, during the intro, I wanna make my volume a little bit softer. Not much, just a little bit. And I'm talking about 1 dB. Like that. What that's gonna do is, right now my drop is going to sound a little bit louder than the build-up itself. It's a really small, really subtle difference, but by doing that, I create a little bit more impact right on the start of the drop. And it definitely works. It helps to sort of like make your drop, or isolate your drop a little bit more. Give your drop a little bit more punch, a little bit more loudness in terms of how it's perceived, not in terms of actual loudness, because I'm not really doing that much, and after the mastering, that level will be brought up, and that 1 dB of difference will not be seen in the actual peak level of the audio file when it's mastered. But what this means is that right on the drop, the mastering chain will affect the track more than during the intro. And that is because the volume of the track itself that is being driven into the mastering plugin is a little bit louder, and therefore it will trigger more of the effects in the mastering chain that we're gonna do next week. So I'm also gonna add that same volume thing to the breakdown. So let's do that. C minus, yeah, perfect. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. I don't want to have this abrupt change, so I'm going to add 2 points, one here and one there. And let's do that. So it just brings that volume down ever so slightly. And I'm going to do the same on the last part of the track. Let's just do this and just bring it down minus 0.4. Add my little fade right there. And there you have it. I can also delete this one. So now you can see I am sort of like gain staging the track itself, and I have my drops be a little bit louder than the rest of the track. I'm looking at this, however, and I know that my outro is also using bass and drums, so I can leave the fade on the end out of here. One thing I'm hearing though is on the start of that outro, we're getting a little bit of that, how do you say that? Low frequencies on the reverb. And I need to find out where they're coming from. I think they're coming from this one. Yeah. I don't want to have that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to delete this part. And by doing that, this part sounds a lot cleaner. Okay, that sounds good. I can close my master down again. And I also hear that thing right at the end, right here, which is not lined up accordingly. I'm going to place this right here. Okay, I think it sounds pretty good. It's starting to sound the way I want. I'm gonna add a little bit more mids to this. A little bit less up. I think I can make the funk chops a little bit louder. And I'm going to add an EQ at the end of the funk chops track to see if there's any low end in here. And there is. There's quite some low end that's being added by the compression. So when I do this, let's just bring this up a little bit. Maybe add some more highs. On the drums group, I'm going to try and see if I can do some more. Let's add the compressor. I think I'm pretty happy with the way this sounds right now. My master track is peaking at minus 5.36. That's a little bit too high, but I've got a really good tool to bring that down a little bit further. And to do that, I've got Shock's Audio Transient Shaper. And normally you would use this to shape your transients of your drums, for instance, but it also has a little bit of another tool that I really like, and that's the drive/saturation function. I'm gonna bring the drive up just a tiny bit, about to that first stripe. And what that's going to do, it's going to take all the loudest peaks in the audio file, in the whole track, and it's going to saturate them a little bit. By doing that, the overall peak volume of the track itself will get a little bit quieter, and therefore we get a little bit more headroom. The only good thing about this plugin, however, is that when it sort of like reduces that volume by saturating the peaks of the signal, you're not really losing that much perceived volume, perceived loudness. The track will still sound just as loud, and in some cases even louder, but the outputted peak level is actually going to be a little bit quieter. So right now we're peaking at minus 5.36, and with that drive/saturation turned on, we are now peaking at minus 6.65. So we already gained about 1 dB with adding that little bit of saturation. I can bring it up even further, see how that sounds. It makes the track sound a little bit more gelled together, actually. It sounds more like a solid track now. I don't know why, but just adding that little bit of saturation helps to make everything sound more cohesive. Well, it's something you would like to have. I mean, well, it's not really that weird. I mean, it's just because of the saturation. Saturation essentially is just some distortion. And whether you use distortion or compression, by adding one of both, you're always introducing distortion. Compression is much cleaner, has much less distortion, but it will still introduce a little bit of distortion. And distortion on itself, when you add that to multiple sounds together, they will sort of like gel together a little bit. It's basically the same thing as what compression on its own does, but you could do the exact same thing with just a distortion module. I mean, you can glue sounds together with either compression, which is the most common technique, but you can also use distortion or saturation or any of those other kinds of things that add a little bit of grit, add a little bit of distortion to your sound. And if you add those on multiple sounds, you glue them together and they will sound more cohesive. So by adding that little bit of saturation, we get a more cohesive sound. And I just added it on the master track, so it's affecting everything in the track, and therefore it's gluing everything together just a little bit, and that's all we need. So I think that's about right. There's one thing I want to change. I heard that just now, and that's when I go in here. I think it's on the FX tree. Yeah. I want to hear how that part sounds without the sweep. Sounds good. But I like the sweep as well. However, I want to have the sweep a little bit shorter. So let's do that. Let's bring the ride up a little bit in volume. I can add a little bit of trenchant shaping to the drums if I want, add a little bit more attack. Okay, so I added a little bit of that saturation to the drums as well. Added a little bit of attack, and I added that before the Vogue, which is doing some compression and using the preamp with the overdrive. So that attack is not really adding much to the peak level. It's just adding a little bit more of a transient on every start of the drum sound. And then that's being cut off again by the preamp and the compression by Vogue. But by doing that, you still got a little bit more impact, a little bit more punch on your drums. And that helps to make your drums punch through the mix a little bit. I can, however, see if I can do some with the EQ. So I EQ'd the drums a little bit, I added a little bit of low frequencies, and I gave the snare a little bit more of a peak. And by doing that, the drums punch through the mix much better. It's not much of a difference. It's just a small little difference, but it really helps to make everything sound a little bit better, a little bit more gelled together maybe. I can take out some of that around 200. To isolate the kick and snare a little bit from each other. And yeah, well, I think this is about right now. I've done quite a lot. The track is peaking at minus 6.66 dB. That's pretty satanic. I like that. Yeah, minus 6.66 dB. Great. That's it for today's video. You now know how I do my mixdowns, and I've showed you all the ins and outs of things that you should know when doing your mixdowns and where you should pay your attention to. Now, next week, I'm gonna do the final stage of this track, which is doing the mastering, and with doing that, we're gonna take that minus 6.66 dB and bring that up to 0 dB and really get the most volume out of this project as possible. I hope you liked this video. If you want to see more of these videos, then please subscribe to this channel or go to my website, which is www.artfx-studios.com, and on that website you can find all kinds of stuff about music production. You can find a shitload of tutorials. You can actually talk on the forum about music production techniques. You can ask your question straight to me and I'll get back at you with an answer. And we can just have a great time on the forum. I mean, the forum is the place where I want you guys to come to. I want you guys to check the forum out. I mean, I'm there, and more people are coming to the forum, and I want to have more people actually discussing techniques about music production. And a lot of people come to my forum just to post their music in the hope that they're gonna get some feedback. Now, I don't know if you are familiar with the way forums work, but generally the thing to get the most amount of feedback on your tracks that you post in the feedback section, to get that feedback, you need to contribute to the community. Nobody is going to give you feedback on your track when you're not giving anything back. And that's what a lot of people forget. A lot of people just come to my website, post their music, and they hope that they're gonna get some feedback. And when nobody has responded within 4 days, they will most likely add another comment, or they will add another reply saying like, hey, why is nobody commenting and stuff like that. Well, believe me, if you contribute to the community by posting comments, not just on the other tracks of producers, because that's really important. You need to post your feedback for other producers, and that way, in return, you will get some feedback back. But however, if you also sort of like take part in the discussions in the production section and on the other parts of the forum, or on the website itself, on the articles on the website, by doing that, you sort of like create an image for yourself. People on my website, visitors from my forum and other members, will see how active you are. And the more active you are, the more you will connect with the other viewers and the other members of my website. If these people start to know you and they like you for the things that you contribute to the community, to the forum and to the website, then you will most likely get a lot more feedback. And that is because people value your information. So if you want to have some feedback and if you want to get the most feedback as possible, then I would really advise you to not just come to the forum and post your music and go away again. Because that's not gonna work, and that's not how forums work in general. So I hope that more people are gonna come to the production section of the forum, and don't be scared. You can open new topics, you can open new threads about any kind of subject that you think is worth it to talk about. And if you open more topics, I'll be there. I mean, I'll be there to answer the topics and to sort of like add something to the discussion. I would like to do that. I'm adding topics myself as well. I'm doing a lot on the forum. But, you know, it's just I see that most people just want to have some feedback. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you need to remember to get feedback, to have other people listen to your music and giving you tips. You might as well need to give them tips. And that can be in forms of feedback, but also in forms of writing a sort of like, maybe you know a lot about compression. You can write a topic which has a post that describes how compression works. You can make it in sort of like a tutorial, article tutorial type of way. Post that in the production session and other people can read it and then ask their questions on the information that's being talked about in the particular topic. And you can then answer those questions. And if you don't know the answer, there's always other people who can contribute to that topic. That way, you're not only going to get a better image on the website and therefore get more feedback, you're also going to become a better producer. Because I find that when you talk to other producers and sort of like exchange techniques and tips and tricks, you're going to get much better in a much faster time period. So that's all that I have to say for today. I hope you like this. Subscribe to the website, subscribe to the forum, come to the website to view the articles. I don't know what you want to do. I hope to see you back soon. And there we go. Peace.